Okay, so let's start. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. We are glad you've joined us today for this public lecture of a good friend of Southern Federal University, Professor David Erben. Today he will talk about American and Native American culture, and you're welcome to ask questions after his talk. You can also write questions in the chat. And Professor Erben, you're welcome.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. If you're looking behind me, you can probably tell that I'm at home. In fact, here at my university, the University of Toledo in Ohio, this will now be 1 full year almost that I have been teaching remotely because of the COVID-19 epidemic. So this semester I'll be teaching my classes at my university from my home again, although we have started some face-to-face classes again, and we hope that very soon our university can return to all face-to-face classes. So it's been an interesting and sometimes difficult year, and I'm sure that the same has happened in Russia at universities. As Yulia said, I've actually now become very, very good friends with some of the professors at Southern Federal University in Taganrog. I first started visiting Taganrog actually so long ago now, I suppose, 2014, I believe, in the fall. Taganrog invited me as part of the Fulbright program to come and visit Taganrog for about a month and to give lectures and some short classes on American culture and the English language. And that then in 2014 started what has become a very mutually beneficial relationship. And since then, I have visited and given face-to-face lectures and classes, and also classes on Skype to different groups of Taganrog students. So this past fall, for example, in 2020, I had students from Taganrog's I think, first year group, and we met approximately once a week throughout the semester and had English language, history, and practice. So I'm very familiar with Taganrog after many visits. I know and recommend the teachers at Taganrog. And as I said, consider them now not just colleagues, but also good friends. I started visiting Russia before 2014 in, I think it was 2011, when I visited Novosibirsk again on a Fulbright program grant. The Fulbright program offers the opportunity for American professors to travel around the world and spend time at foreign universities that have invited them, and they can work with these universities on programs, designing classes, giving lectures, teaching classes. So in Novosibirsk, I was there actually for a full academic year, 9 months, if you can believe it. And it was certainly the coldest place I've ever in the winter visited. But that sort of started my travels, shall we say, to Russia. I've also visited, of course, Moscow and some Moscow universities, St. Petersburg. I've given some lectures there, and a few other places in Russia. So later, if you have questions about my visiting Russia, traveling around Russia, my impressions of Russian culture and Russian people, please just ask me. Otherwise, I went to graduate school here in the United States. I graduated with a master's degree in anthropology from the University of Maryland. And then I went on to a PhD, a doctorate, at a university in Florida, a University of South Florida. And then after completing my PhD, I got a job here in Toledo, Ohio, at the University of Toledo. And I've, been teaching here at Toledo ever since. Although I like to travel, I've also visited many countries in Europe. I've visited China also many times. And again, if you have questions about my travels to other universities in other countries, during the question and answer period, just ask whatever you like. You also might be interested, if you're looking at my wall, you can see decorations that may suggest to some of you a Native American theme. That is because, as I think you know, I am Native American, American Indian, indigenous. There are a number of ways to refer to the first people who inhabited the Americas. And I was born on a reservation in the Southwest in New Mexico. And so if you have interests in Native American culture and history, I'll talk a little bit about this shortly, but you can also ask questions as you like. One of the reasons, actually, that I've continued to visit Russia is because you have in Russia a lot of people, I think, that are very curious about Native American culture and history. You have friendship societies, for example, in St. Petersburg and Moscow and Novosibirsk. I've met with them, talked with many of them, still communicate with some of them on VK or Skype. Oh, and let me also mention, I do use VK. So if you want to continue communicating with me or have questions that you think of after today, I'll find a way to let you know my VK address, or you can just look up my name, do a search for David Erben, and you should be able to find me pretty quickly. So I've got some notes to my left. So if you see me peeking this way, I'm looking at another computer that has my notes for today's talk on them, just to remind me what I want to cover talking with you all today. So the next topic I have is my teaching here at the University of Toledo. So we have an English department here that teaches American, British literature classes. We have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in English literature. We also have a creative writing program and a linguistics program, but our linguistics program has gotten smaller and smaller over the years. And we don't now offer a degree anymore in linguistics. So when I came here, and since my arrival here, I teach at my university classes. For example, this semester, I'm teaching a class called Writing About Literature, where students who are not English majors read works of literature, and then we try to learn the various ways that we discuss and write about literature. So we talk a little bit about interpreting literature, reading literature, introducing the language that we use when we talk about literature, and such. The other class I'm teaching is American ethnic literature, and this is part of my university's emphasis on American diversity. So I think you all know that American culture is actually many cultures. So one of those cultures, a very small culture now, is Native American culture. So my university has a class called American Ethnic Literature, and when I teach it, I focus on Native Americans. Right now, there's another section of this class being taught by a different professor, and he's focusing on Latin American literature. The class also sometimes focuses on African American literature, or there's a professor or two who doesn't focus on one of America's ethnic minorities, but two or three or maybe more. In the fall, I'll be teaching an English class on Native American literature. This is a 4,000 level class. That means it's meant for advanced students, but it is also a class that other students from other degrees may take because it's about Native Americans, and we have a requirement here that students, all students, take some classes to learn about American minority groups. So if you have noticed, I've been talking about something that's a big difference between the American university system and your Russian system. In your Russian system, you join a group, we call them cadres, when you first arrive at the university, and you stay with that group until you graduate, usually. And all of you in your group go to the same classes each year. Here at the University of Toledo and in all universities in the United States, you arrive at the university as an individual, and you choose each semester what classes you take. And so each class will have probably different students each semester for all of the 3 or 4 years that you're here. So it's a very different experience. You may make friends, you may have, when you're a junior or senior, classes only in your degree topic, like English classes, and you'll meet the same students again and again, but you do not join a group of students and then follow them throughout your entire career as a student. So it's a very different kind of system that we have here. Otherwise, I think I've run out of things to say about my university history. So I'll focus on a particular topic. It's one part of a lecture that I give when I travel. It's also a lecture that I'm giving right now in my class on ethnic literature, Native American literature. I'll be giving it actually in about a week or two on a video conference like this one. So the students from my class will log in like you have, and I will start this lecture on the origins of Native Americans. I want to talk with you for about 20, 25 minutes or so, and then allow time for you to ask me questions. So I think I've got about, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most to just continue talking. So I'll stop talking about the origins of Native Americans in about 12 to 14 minutes. And you could ask me questions about that topic if you like. I don't think I'll finish. The lecture is actually quite long. But to give you an example of both myself as a teacher and also an example of a topic that I've spoken about in Russia many times, in European universities when I visited, also for the public. I'll say a little bit now about the origins of American Indians, and especially the different theories that especially Indo-Europeans and Americans have come up with when the question is asked, where do Native Americans come from? It also involves when did they come here, and why did they come here? And just to give you a sense, there are different ways that you can approach this question. You could go to, for example, a scientist, an anthropologist especially, and ask this question. You could go to a religious person and ask this question. You could go to just a person with no formal training and ask this question. And you would find probably that there are still today different answers that people believe in, that they've acquired from their schooling, books they've read, their religious views, etc. And in science, particularly, this answer, where did Native Americans come from and when, has changed over time. So quickly now, if we go back, and you all know that this area, the Americas, was unknown, sort of, to Europeans for a long time. Now I know many of you know about the Vikings, and you know that they visited the Americas, North America, many, many hundreds of years before Christopher Columbus. But the travels of the Vikings was lost or forgotten. And so for a long time, there was a holiday here in the United States, Columbus Day, that celebrated when Christopher Columbus supposedly discovered the Americas. We could talk more about that, but we'll focus instead on the people that he found here in the Americas, which he called Indians. And you in Russia are very fortunate. You have two different words for an American Indian and a person from India. Whereas in English, we just have the one, Indian. And we know today, of course, and knew very quickly after Columbus arrived, that the people in the Americas are not from India. And he did not arrive at India. Instead, he arrived at a continent, in fact, two continents, that Europeans had forgotten really about. So immediately there were questions. Who are those people there? Where did they come from? When did they arrive in the Americas? All of these different Indian people. And Christopher Columbus had on his ships priests, and these, of course, were the most learned people of that time. They could read and write. They were very educated for people of that time, whereas all of the men on his ships could not read or write. And so they were the first to answer this question. Who are these people? Where did they come from? Indians. So the first answer to the question, the first theory about Native American origins is they're the descendants, the great-great-great-grandchildren of the Israelites. And they came from the Middle East. There's a story in the Old Testament about a group of Israelites who became lost after a conflict. And so in the Bible, there's a story of these Israelites wandering off. And there's been curiosity ever since if that was historically accurate, and then where did they go? And so for these priests, using the Bible as their source material, these Indians in the Americas were the lost tribes of Israel. They also decided that the languages that Indians were speaking were related to, descendants of, Hebrew. And so using the knowledge that they had at that time, 1492, the 1500s, the first theory for the origins of Native Americans was that they're descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. We know today, of course, that that's not true, although you'll still find books. If you Google this topic, you'll still find books from as recently the 70s, 80s even, that present this argument. So it hasn't really completely disappeared. Now for the next 4 minutes or so, I'll just list some of the other theories without going into any detail. So, lost tribes of Israel. A second theory, descendants of any civilization that is considered to have been lost, fictional civilization, descendants of the Atlantean, mythological Atlantean people. Or there's a Pacific mythological civilization called Lemuria, descendants of Lemurians. So that's number 2. Number 3, descendants of aliens. Aliens in their spacecraft visited Earth. They either met and helped and influenced people that they found in the Americas, or some of the aliens stayed in the Americas and then developed into Native Americans. So aliens. Then we can talk about different scientific theories. And this for you in Russia becomes closer and closer to home. People, your indigenous people, not Slavic Russians, but the indigenous people of Siberia, crossed the Bering Strait when it was frozen 15,000, 20,000 years ago. They walked across into what today is Alaska. And there, these indigenous people from many thousands of years ago from Russia are the ancestors of today's American Indians. Or they walked and took boats. Or people came from many different places around the world. People from China took boats and came here. People from Africa, people from Europe took their boats and came here. The key to that theory is they had to have developed the kinds of ships that could cross the ocean. That's really, really difficult if you go back hundreds of years. But the Chinese, during the Han Dynasty, created such ships. There was an African civilization that created ocean-going ships. The Irish, at one time in their ancient history, built such ships. Or there's also, in terms of the ice, the last ice age, there are some scientists that argue the Pacific Ocean in some places was frozen. And maybe people from Europe also just walked from Europe to the Americas. But the dominant scientific theory today is that the majority of the ancestors of Native Americans came from what we call today Siberia. The last part to this, the most recent part that science is contributing, which I'll mention, is DNA. I've never really looked or thought to ask anyone in Russia, but here in the United States, it's very popular to send a DNA sample to a company that traces your DNA. We have lots of these kinds of businesses where they research your genetic history. I forget how much it costs. I think it's like $150 or something. And they send you back a family tree and show where you are in the history of all human beings. Well, we've used this in anthropology too, and we've used it to try to also contribute to answering the question, where did Native Americans come from? And what DNA has told us is there is DNA in some Native Americans from Asia, from China, from the Pacific Islands. There's also some DNA from Europe, and even some DNA from Africa. The vast majority of DNA, though, comes from Siberian peoples. So the DNA evidence seems to support that there were people in ancient times that came to the Americas from many different places, but most of them came from Siberia. So that's the conclusion to the formal remarks that I want to give today. I'll now stop talking so much and ask for any questions that you have. So please, again, if you want to find me on VK, look up David Erben, or ask Alexi or Yulia or one of the other Taganrog people for my VK address. I didn't think to make a way for me to show it to you. So please, questions.
Thank you, David, for the lecture, and I also want to invite everybody to ask questions. And maybe while people are thinking, I will ask another one. So, has your life changed with our virus, and what changes have you experienced?
Yes, definitely. Do you have in Russia this phrase, the new normal? So we have been saying that phrase a lot, but you know, it's taken months and months to really figure out what the new normal is. So I have not been to my office at the university in almost a year. The COVID-19 pandemic stopped face-to-face classes here, I think it was in March of last year. So I have not been to the university except to go to the pharmacy. I've visited a couple of times for other reasons, but no classes for me, no office hours to meet with students. When I go out, unless I'm walking alone, you know, if I go for a walk, I don't wear a mask. But anytime I'm near people, I wear a mask. And so, you know, learning to try to talk with a mask, it was very uncomfortable, you know, to wear it for a long time. I got used to that, I guess. When I go shopping, I wear a mask. Not being able to go to groups, you know, my university has each year lots of activities, lectures, they show films, we have ballet and concerts, you know, and all of that stopped. So it has not been possible for a year to have cultural activities. They've done some things on video. So we've had some lectures on video. I think what all of the students and teachers have learned is that it's possible to have very successful classes online. But there are some classes that you really should have face-to-face. It's not possible to turn every class into an online class. So for me, I prefer teaching the ethnic literature class face-to-face, the Native American class face-to-face. The writing about literature class, I actually prefer to teach online. So yes, professionally, there have been the biggest changes. And then personally, I really just stay home, a lot. So finding activities just here in my home, other than going for short walks. There's a museum that's very close to where I live, and I have gone there since it reopened, but they make appointments so they don't have too many people at the same time. And I think the last thing I'll say is it's taken Americans a while to really get serious about COVID-19. So it's taken a while for people to really start wearing masks, when they go out, and the 6 feet distance, the social distancing. And I think from the news, it's still very bad here with this COVID-19. So we're still, and they have new variants that are appearing. So we're still waiting to try to find when it will end.
No end to it. So, David, there is a question from Sebastian Bakalarczyk, who is also a visiting professor of our university from Poland. Sebastian, you're welcome, and I'm happy you're here with us.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Yes, hello, Julia. Hello, Professor. It's the great honor to listen to your lecture, especially in the times of the pandemic. I have no directly dedicated question. I have only the remark about the possibilities. For me, it is great pleasure to have the opportunity. I try to be in my life realistic, but sometimes I try to be also optimistic. In this case, I try to be optimistic because I have the opportunity to cooperate with the university. One of the leaders, there is Julia, and yes, it is very nice to see you once again, Julia, because the last time it was almost 1.5 years ago. And it's the pleasure always when I have a possibility to talk to you. But Professor, first of all, I want to thank you for this lecture, because it is a great pleasure to listen really native American, because it's not so often to meet people like you, especially in the times of the pandemic, and the distance which we have now actually give us the chance to communicate between US and Russia, and as you can believe, I'm here and now in Poland, and we are able to talk together and to change or exchange even the points of view, and it's the great pleasure, because in the normal times before pandemic, it wasn't possible, because we do prefer only the personal contact, not the contact via computers, via internet, via distance, and so on. And what it gives us, now we have some opportunities to meet each other, to see, to know our points of view, and so on. And I suppose after the pandemic, I believe in it deeply, we'll be able to return, but with new reality, because it's not the same, because old times never comes back, simply. We will have new reality. And of course, I share with you my point of view about the distance learning. I hate it. I really prefer face-to-face with my students, because reading between lines, seeing the behavior of people and reacting immediately, it's not the same when you are speaking to the screen and you can see only the flashing light, and you are not able to know they are listening to you, they are interact, even when they do. It's not the same. But telling about the story you mentioned in your lecture, it is possible. In Poland, it's popular and more popular to read DNA about the genes, what we are going from. And of course, majority of Poles are having Caucasian race. It is typical for European, but in my family, 2.5% is coming from Africa, and it could be surprise for all of us. But it was really nice, and I really would like to thank you for interesting lecture and to meet you. Unfortunately, only in the distance, but I hope sometimes we can meet personally. And of course, Julia, it's great when I can see you. Thank you very much, Professor.
Well, I have visited Poland, and let me say that in my visits, have found the Polish people to be extremely welcoming. My department has a formal relationship with a university in Łódź.
Really? I'm from Łódź.
Oh, I have visited Łódź and given lectures there. And Poland has a very active American Studies group organization.
Yes, we have. Actually, we have.
And I've also visited Lublin and, of course, Warsaw as a tourist and to give lectures. And Polish people are very interested in Native Americans.
Yes, we are. I have great honor and a great opportunity because from the last 13 years, I'm the professor at the Pittsburgh University, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in US.
Oh, you're close to me. Pittsburgh is close.
Oh my God, how world is close. Everyone is around us. Even if we're sitting in States or in Poland, we can be together. Unfortunately, oh, fantastic. And also we can talk with people in Russia. They give us the plus between Poland and Russia as well. Thank you once again.
Yes, very nice to meet you. Thank you.
I hope for the future cooperation or for the future information we are able to exchange simply if we have the same friends in Russia.
Indeed, yes.
In Julia in person, of course.
We'll use Julia, yes.
Thank you, Sebastian. I was so happy to see you. It was such a pleasure. And actually, we miss all our professors here in Taganrog. Actually, I'm looking forward to the minute when we are allowed to see each other and to come and to visit each other. And David, I would like just to add that Sebastian is a connoisseur of economics. Yeah, so and regularly, almost every year, Sebastian comes to Taganrog.
Yes, and the first thing I'm really appreciated is last year, 2020, I received the honorary doctor honoris causa from the Southern Federal University. It's great honor for me, really. And unfortunately, from the last year, it wasn't able to receive it personally from the Scientific Council, and I'm still waiting. And I simply can't wait the times when I can be in the Taganrog in Rostov in Russia as well.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
Thank you. And there is another question from Vladislav Laboda. Vladislav, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, David.
Hello.
I'm Vladislav. I study at the third school. Thank you for your lecture. It was really interesting. I really like to learn something new about Native Americans. And here is my question. First of all, I have to remark. You were talking that the most dominant theory was that Native Americans came from Siberia. And here is my question. What language were they actually speaking about before Columbus arrived at America?
Yes, let me start by saying I've just noticed there's a light source, the sun. It's in the morning here. So the sun has managed to start peeking through the window. So you're seeing a weird, I think, image of me with the sun on this part of my face. So sorry for that. In prehistoric times, they would have been speaking the languages of the indigenous people of Siberia. When Columbus arrived, they had evolved, right, into the different cultures that we know about today historically. So the Mayans, the Aztecs, Cherokee, Chippewa, Apache, Lakota Sioux. So at that time, when Columbus arrived, there were hundreds of different languages. But when you go back before Columbus, thousands of years, then the languages would have all been the ones that the Siberian people were speaking thousands of years ago. And we don't have any historical record of what those languages were like. We just know the languages that developed over the many years after the arrival of humans. One thing I didn't mention talking about science is that there have been no pre-Homo sapien skeletons found in the Americas. So that tells scientists that humans became humans before they came here to the Americas. So they had to come from someplace else. They didn't evolve here. So you can find Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal skeletons in Europe and in Asia, and of course in Africa. But you don't find those pre-humans here. I also have to say, because I really forgot, and I'm ashamed to have forgotten, you could also ask a Native American, where do you come from? And if you ask a Native American, then you will get a story, right, like a Christian story. This is my origin based on my religion. And those don't usually fit the scientific model. So Native Americans have their own beliefs about where they came from. And in some of those beliefs, they were also given language. And so they got their language from the spirits, from the spirit world. So it just depends again on where you go to find the answer. There have been many attempts to trace all of the languages spoken in the Americas back to one language. And it's always been very controversial. So there's been no proof, 100%, that all Native American languages came from one language. It may have been that the languages were influenced by Chinese and African and European languages, if those people came too. So it's still a big place that people do research and publish and present arguments. But I think most anthropological linguists will say languages for the most part developed from Siberian people and the language they were speaking when they arrived here, 20, 30,000 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Vladislav. And there is another question from Yelena.
Yes, hello, dear professor.
Hi.
I'm also very happy to see you here. First of all, of course, I'm not have the question, but I always want to continue the discussion which starts Yulia about distance learning. And of course, I think that, of course, this is not a good idea, but this is a great opportunity. Then two of our visiting professors, one of our most loved visiting professors, can be in one place, in one virtual place, and speak with us in different topics. So thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, David, very much. It's really a great pleasure for us. And I have a question. Maybe it's for Professor David Erben and also for Professor Sebastian Bakalavchik too. Why do you want to come to Russia? Why maybe which difference between Russian students and between your own students or the students of another part of our world? why Russia, why maybe Southern Federal University, and why which your maybe best feelings about participation in our lectures, in our events, and visiting of Southern Federal University.
Well, I guess I'll answer first. I would say the biggest thing was good luck, I suppose. And actually, there's a Polish part to this answer. My university has a sister university in Łódź, Poland. And they were having a conference on Native American literature. And so my department asked me to attend this conference in Poland. And when I arrived in Poland at the conference, there were professors there from Russia. So I made contacts with Russian professors in Poland at a conference dedicated to Native American literature and history. And then those Russian professors invited me to visit their universities in Russia. And then I was asked if I would like to do a Fulbright at Novosibirsk. And so I spent 9 months at Novosibirsk as part of a Fulbright program. And then I was on the Fulbright list of specialists, and Yulia was looking for an American specialist to come to Taganrog, and good luck. They liked my, I don't know, picture, my name, my vita. It's a mystery actually to me what Yulia and her committee liked about me. And so they invited me. The specialist program puts us out, American specialists, out there on a list. And then universities look at this list in the areas that they're interested in, and they invite the professor. And so I was invited in 2014 in the fall to come, and I spent, I think, a month about in Taganrog. I'll never forget arriving in Rostov during one of the worst traffic jams I've ever seen. I think the traffic was all the way from Rostov to Taganrog. It was a long, long trip to arrive finally in Taganrog. But since then, I think we just made a nice connection. And I've returned either virtually or in person. I also spent a full semester in Taganrog with a Fulbright grant. So I think a lot of that is just professional luck. Previously, I had been visiting St. Petersburg and Moscow, so I was familiar with Russia, and I would say that's because, like in Poland, Russian people have just been really generous and kind with me. So I've always been very warmly welcomed. So visiting and giving talks or having short workshops and such has just been a joy for me when I visited Russia, and also, as I said, when I visited Poland. So I've gotten a lot of encouragement and support. So that's my story.
Okay, my story is completely different. It's obvious because I'm the European, and I started my career with the European countries, and of course I'm the visiting professor of different universities around the Europe. It's too obvious because I have very close, the distance of 2 hours to Paris is not the problem. It's like between Boston and Pittsburgh, for example. It's not the same than the huge area between between the West and the East of the country of US, of course. It's a little bit different. My story is coming from the department we have at the university, and the lady which is quite known by Elena because the lady is working at the university periodically, and of course she asked me to visit Russia. The first, like the ice breaking, I'm speaking in Russia, my response was, why me? What I did wrong? You are sending me to Russia. What is wrong with me? And of course, when she proposed me Rostov-on-Don, it was the great possibility to return to the place I visited 40 years ago. My first visit in Russia with my family, with my parents, with my grandparents, it was exactly in Rostov-on-Don. And it was the time with some relatives exist there. But after, of course, I visited Taganrog, and now I'm able to say, after a couple of years, or even I'm not able to count it, is it 3, 4, or 5, it doesn't matter exactly, I have friends there. Because people in Russia with the culture, with the languages, which is close to Polish, because we have the same Slavic roots for the languages, and we have the same hospitality, we have the same behavior, we understand our jokes, and it's really nice situation when we could observe it. I'm using my mobile phone and someone called me in this same time. And the Taganrog is really my hometown, next one. I feel like at home, even I can see the buildings. Professor, when you visited Łódź, our main street, it's called Piotrowska. In Taganrog, there is Piotrowskaya from the Tsar Peter I. Even the names of the main streets in the countries, in the cities I'm visiting are almost the same. And of course, I have my personal friends, the Elena who is attending the meeting at Teams, of course, Julia, but also I should mention my personal friend, Paweł Wladimirovich. With him, we have the special type of the relation. The lady who asked me from my department said, "Oh, professor from Russia is very distinguished, the tall man with very good manners." And after I met him, I know he's typical Slavic person with the soul which is open for the people. And of course, we cooperate on the level of the science. We publish several papers together. We do the research. We have double diploma agreement between universities. And with Elena, we have plans for the next 105 years of our cooperation between the universities. It's the pleasure to be here. It's the pleasure to meet next friend of the SFEDU, which is my third alma mater, because I graduated University of Łódź. This university you visited, Professor. I also graduated the university in London School of Economics, and now I have the diploma of the third with the honorary doctor. Really pleasure to cooperate with Russia. The answer is, why Russia? Why not? Because people around the world are the same. We are speaking the same language of science, language of the friendship. We don't take the politics because we don't want to touch it. It is sensitive, even after what was happened in the January 6th in US. We can see it could be everywhere around the world, and we should be very sensitive of this thing of democracy, which is crucial for every country. And of course, for us, the distance, giving us the opportunity to see each other. Every one of us is sitting in the home place. Professor is having very morning. There is the afternoon in Taganrog, and I have 3 p.m. a little bit earlier here in Łódź. It means everything is possible when we have good intentions. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you, Elena, for this question. You can see we have completely different mentalities with professors. but we are speaking the same language, the language of cooperation and the language we spoke between friends.
Thank you very much, dear professors. It's really great answer. And I remember my first visit in Łódź. And after this first visit, everyone asked me, you want to go to Poland once again? Why? Because I were in Poland 3.5 days, and then the second day I broken my hand, and come back to Russia with a broken hand. But I love Poland very much, and want to come here. I think every day and every hour. Now
in Poland, when we spoke about the visiting professors as Elena, we say we have hospitality for everyone who is visiting our lovely country, but sometimes it's dangerous because our visitors going back home with broken arms.
Yes. Okay, and now I have an idea. Maybe some of our participants of this lecture want to ask a question to Professor David Erben or Professor Sebastian Bakalarczyk, but before this, I have an idea. I think Yulia Vladimirovna like this idea, and even Pavel Vladimirovich. I think we should do some round table, maybe round computer table between our visiting professors, because we have 13 visiting professors, and I think it will be very interesting to discuss some questions, to discuss some ideas, and maybe we will find the time to do this.
I think it's a great idea. We just miss people and we miss communication and we miss our visiting professors. I'd love to see everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
So regular meetings. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we will plan this event, and I think we will do it great. So, dear guests, maybe some of yours have a question, maybe some questions from our students from language department.
Elena, can I ask David a question, but it's not my own question. Timur wanted to ask it, but somehow he disappeared. I'm not sure he will be able to ask. David, he wanted to ask you about the political situation in the USA, and what's your attitude to it, and what's your attitude to the recent events?
And what candidate did you support?
Yes, Timur, hello. Timur, you can ask your own question. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just thought you
Everything is okay, Yulia Vladimirovna.
Well, I think I can say that everybody at my university, the professors, are all extremely happy and now optimistic after Biden has won the election and now been in office for a few days. So for the last 4 years, I think academics around the country were very nervous and concerned about the direction of the country under Trump. The events in Washington that you referred to on January 6th, I think everybody watched, I watched with shock, disbelief that such a thing could happen in Washington, D.C. There's also been a lot of discussion about the way the police reacted. And I think there's a good argument that if those people who entered the building illegally had been Black or Native American, the police would have used more violence against them. So it has kind of re-energized the discussion about race in the United States. I have only myself superficially researched QAnon and those right-wing groups that I guess were some of the main supporters of the January 6th takeover of the House of Representatives. I guess now they're largely silent and figuring out what they'll do next. We still have to see if the government aggressively pursues the people who committed crimes and then tries them and imprisons them. So we're all waiting to see what the law response will be. So I guess right now there's a relief, and we're watching Biden and following his executive orders and what the Congress will do now that it's Democratic. The House of Representatives and the Senate are both Democratic, although the Senate has an actual tie, but the vice president votes, so he can vote, and they'll have one more vote than the Republicans. So we have a lot of issues here after Trump with the economy, COVID-19. Universities have had funding problems because students have not come to the university, not as many students. So the federal government has last year sent money to universities. So I would say quickly, I was hoping Biden would win. I did vote for Biden. And so there is relief, but there's still, I think, a lot of concern that a portion of this country still is very supportive of Trump, and we're sort of waiting for any news about what they may be thinking of doing next, you know, what plans they're making, and if really that's over, if the groups that supported the violence in Washington, D.C. are just going to disappear. Everybody is just also kind of waiting to see what Trump will do, because he may not simply go golfing again. He may try to stay active in the Republican Party. So relief and some optimism along with concern and nervousness. So that would be, I think, a fair way to say many people, especially in academics, are feeling right now. And our semester has just started. We're starting our second week now, so we're back at work. And so we're also coping with COVID-19 and preventive measures, and nervous about these new strains that we're reading about that have appeared in the United States, and new restrictions on travel. They're imposing greater travel restrictions now because of these new kinds of COVID. So trying to stay positive, I suppose, but at least we can say now Trump isn't president. So
thanks, Professor.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yulia Vladimirovna, your microphone is not. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, David. There is another question from Ivan. Ivan Ribuchin, you're welcome.
Good afternoon, Professor. Well, it's actually morning in Ohio.
Thank you.
When you're so engaged in conversation, you tend to forget about such things, small things as time zones. Well, thank you for your little lecture. It was very interesting to find out about the ancestry of Native American people and the connection with the native Siberian, Paleo-Siberian people. I would like to go back to this topic and ask you what kind of literature, maybe what kind of digital resources you could recommend to people who want to find out more about this topic. Not on the academic level, just as a general interest.
Yes, and then I'll invite you to take a look at my VK page, because I use that mostly for my, interaction with Russian students. So there are some stories by Native American writers, contemporary stories. There's also some traditional stories on my VK page. There's some videos of Native Americans dance and some music. Otherwise, I could give you a list of Native American authors, and you could find online examples of some of their poems and stories and portions of their novels. There are a lot of websites, of course, now that even Native Americans have created to support their writing and music and such. However, I will say we have now in Native America traditional works. We have contemporary works, novels and short stories and poetry genres are not traditional. They've all been learned by Native American writers from American and European examples. So you have to think, do you want traditional or do you want contemporary? And it's the same with music and dance. The most popular music on Native American reservations today is rap music. It's Native American rap music. So Native American singers in the rap style. So young people in Native America, like in Russia, really like rap for some reason. Native American rap is much more political and social than mainstream American rap is right now. So maybe that's part of the reason. So you'll find examples of this on my VK page, or if you write to me, get my email address or drop me a note on VK, and I can give you a list of authors that I use in my class, that students have told me here in the US that they like. So there's lots of opportunity to find examples online, or I can send you, I have a lot of digital versions, PDF copies of stories and such. And I'll be perfectly happy to share it with anybody that's interested in such literature.
Thank you, Ivan, for your question.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, David.
I found your wiki page. I will for now study the materials that can be found there. And I realized that I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Ivan, and I'm also the student of Southern Federal University. I'm a student of Engineering Academy, but I was always interested in American culture and languages. So once again, thank you for the lecture.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. Oh, and let me add, if you go to my VK page, you will also find music and stuff that I just like. And so I have collected stuff there for myself. So not everything there is related to Native America, but you will find a collection Native American music and stories and videos that I have for students.
Ivan, can I ask you a question? So am I right that you participated in our Olympiad 3 years ago and you talked to Professor David Erben?
Oh yeah, it's just been 3 years. It seems like
3
a
and a half
lifetime.
already, yeah?
Yeah. I don't recall what was the why was it? I think it was the opening of the linguistics department. Is
Oh
that
no,
right?
we opened in 1952.
Oh no, so
And just
but yeah, now I remember.
communication in English.
Yeah, I remember. I spoke to David briefly, but I did.
Ivan. Okay, good luck, Ivan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. You too.
And there is another question from Anastasia. Nastya, you're welcome.
Hello, Professor.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you for your lecture. It was really interesting, and our group, we really miss our lectures, and we really miss talking to you in English. And I have one more question to you. The previous speaker asked you about books, and I want to know what films would you recommend to learn English? Because, for example, I like watching films or series or some kind of videos more than reading, and I can learn words quickly than if I read some books. So what can you advise?
Well, I would think of a genre that you like, if it's comedy or if it's drama or action adventure, because you know that American movies, they're one of the main things that people around the world like and are very popular almost everywhere. So I would watch just a movie that you like that's in English, but get a copy that's in English and is not dubbed in Russian, and then make sure you get one with subtitles, Russian subtitles, because you know the characters often, as English speakers, speak quickly, and they often use a lot of American slang. And so if you're watching it to practice English, you'll probably have to sometimes stop it and go back a few seconds and have that kind of experience with the movie instead of just watching the movie from beginning to end to enjoy it. But I've found that with students, you have to find a movie that you like, that's got an actor or actors or a story that you are very interested in, because then you enjoy the movie. And at the same time, if you can listen to the English pronunciation and follow it with Russian subtitles, and maybe, you know, have a vocabulary list or something that you make while you're watching it, I mean, you'll learn American slang, for example, which might be interesting for you. You'll hear pronunciation, but it's also a challenge, I think, at first because of how quickly the characters usually speak. So that's my suggestion. Make a list, yeah, yourself, because you know a lot of Disney films are very popular in Russia. The Hollywood action adventure films, they're Hollywood actors that are very popular in Russia. I think the key is don't watch a dubbed film when you want to try to improve your speaking skills and vocabulary skills. But yeah, I think we all agree there's nothing like practicing English with somebody who's also speaking English. So that's the best practice. But there are other ways too that you can get good, practice.
Thank you for your answer. And I also have one more question. We have in Russia a lot of films about Native Americans, and there are also some movies about Native Americans that have been produced by Americans, like Hollywood films, and I can find them pretty different, or just in some cases Native Americans are shown a bit differently. And what do you think about it, where the characters are more like Native Americans?
Yes, if you really got into that, you'd find that the attitude, which used to be negative, has changed to positive in the United States. And you see that in films. So older films, the Indians are negative. They're violent, they're savages. But today, if you see Indians in films, they're usually positive. They're sensitive, they're kind, they are supportive. So it's kind of a history of the American attitude toward Native Americans. Probably still today, the film that people like the most, that started really showing Native Americans more honestly, is Dances with Wolves. It's a film, I think, from 1989 or so. It was very, very popular when it was released. And so that one is, for most people, a lot of fun to watch. It's historical. It's set back in the 1800s. The main character is a white character played by Kevin Costner, but he becomes an Indian when he lives with them. It's got a lot about life as an Indian at that time. So that one is always one that I recommend. But as you said, there have been films made about Indians from Hollywood, but also European films and Russian films. And I think a lot of times when you watch those films, you really see the attitude of those cultures toward Indians. In the Russian films, I think the Indians are almost always the heroes. And in many European films, they're the heroes. Even old films, they're the heroes. And that's interesting to compare with American films from the 50s, 60s, when the Indians were usually the bad guys. So yeah, these days, there aren't so many Westerns made, but we do have films now about life for Indians who live today. So films about reservation Indians and films about Indians who live in big cities. So I think they're more maybe honest today. All the Indians aren't wearing feathers and riding horses and hunting buffalo. I mean, they work as professors at the University of Toledo. So, just kind of normal, but still a member of a minority, in the United States. So those are films about life, today. So there's lots of stuff out there. You can also find short films, by the way. People always forget there's wonderful short films out there to watch, maybe 5 to 20 minutes. And if you watch some of these, you'll see that genre, filmmaking, can just be so powerful, even if it's only a few minutes. So a lot of Native American directors who have trouble getting money can get money to make short films. And so that's a place they're doing a lot of work right now. So it's a very exciting, I think, place. If you're interested in film, I think it's a fun place to be, and also lots of interesting things going there with Native Americans and also just with other topics as well.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, dear professor. Okay, maybe someone else have a question, because this will be our last question to Professor David Erben for today. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Professor, have you seen any Russian films, or maybe some USSR films? And if so, which film do you prefer?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. I've been trying to think of a way to get my favorite Russian film into this conversation, and I just couldn't find a way to mention Kinzaza before you asked. So I think that is one of the greatest films ever made, and I still don't think I understand 50% of what is going on in that film. Of course, I only watch it with English subtitles. Otherwise, I've seen Solaris, for example. I've seen some other classic Soviet-era films. I'm sure all of you know that Soviet filmmaking at one time was one of the most important and influential in the world. I have seen some more recent Russian films. I was interested in films about the war in Chechnya and Afghanistan. So I saw, I think it's called Rota 9, for example. But honestly, I think your filmmaking today is an imitation of Hollywood mostly. You've kind of lost your distinctive Russian style of filmmaking. But yes, Soviet films, I just can't say enough about how important they are. As Yulia can tell you, I've seen the film, I forget the name, it's classic, about the people that get drunk and get... Yes. So there are a bunch of films that my friends in Taganrog recommended, which I've watched, which I've had great fun and great memories of watching. So I've tried to see as many classic Soviet era films as possible, and I have a very, very positive opinion. But Kinzaza, that is, for me, one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made. Cool, everyone.
I see. Thanks a lot for your answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Timur.
Okay.
Can I just thank David for the lecture and for answering the questions. I really enjoyed our discussion. I enjoyed seeing David on my screen. I really, you know that we really love you. And I hope that this year you will manage to come to Taganrog and will manage to speak personally, face to face, and will restore this great tradition of you coming to visit us and restore this tradition of communication and enjoying the friendship. You are our best friend. Thank you very much, David. Thank you
very much.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for visiting with me online.
Elena?
Yes, from my side and from the side of Pavel Vladimirovich, he's in his business meeting now, and unfortunately he couldn't connect. to our discussion, but I think that in nearest future we will manage this round table, and of course we will see, unfortunately, only on our screens, but we will see each other once again. So thank you very much, Professor David Erben. Also, thank you very much, Professor Sebastian Bakalarczyk, because it was really non-predicted for us, which you will enjoy to this lection and will also connect to our discussion. So thank you both of yours. Thank you for our students and colleagues who connect to this discussion. I think that it was really interesting for all of yours, and we will be glad to see all of yours in our these open popular science lections of IMES SFEDU. So have a good luck, and wish to see all of yours not only in distance form, but of course in physical form, even in Poland, in Russia, in the USA, in every country. So have a good luck, have good evening, good day, good morning in different times, and I think now we will finish our today's lecture.
Thank you. До свидания.
До свидания.